Good morning, artists. Today we're going to come back to our landscape that we created during our last class and talk about something super important, which is color. Before we do though, let's just review what we learned about landscape from last week. So take a look. Here is a picture that I showed you that shows the 4 parts of a landscape. First off, a landscape is very simply a picture of land. It can be made in many ways: drawing, painting, and really most commonly photography. So in a landscape, there are typically 4 parts. The first part that we started talking about was the horizon line. The horizon line separates the sky from the land. So if I take a look in this picture, the horizon line runs right along the top edge of this field. It's kind of interrupted by this building here, or the silhouette of the building, and then this one here, and then continues. So there's the horizon line. Usually the horizon line is in the background of the picture, which is the farthest thing away. It's where you'll find the smallest objects. Even if they are actually large things like houses, they'll appear to be smaller because they're further away from the viewer. Next, we come to the middle ground, which is right in the middle of your paper. So here we've just got the field and maybe a little bit of the girl that's sitting here in the front. And then finally, we have the part that is closest to us, the foreground. It's in the front. And in this part of the picture, usually you have the largest objects. You also tend to have the most detail. So you might notice here how you can actually see the texture in the grass, maybe more vibrant colors, and things like that. So there are the parts of the landscape. So last week, we worked on a drawing together here. And I know you worked on your own at home. So here's mine that I was working on. I started with my horizon line and then created the, background, middle ground, foreground. And next, I went ahead and traced with a marker. Now, one of the things that I always like to do after I trace is to get rid of any extra pencil lines that are left behind. This just kind of cleans it up and makes it so that when you're coloring, you don't have to worry about those extra lines showing through. So real quick, just take a moment to scan your artwork before you start coloring and get rid of any extra pencil lines. So I'm just going to do that real quick with my eraser here. And then we are going to take a look at color. And so while I'm doing this, for this project, please use either crayons or colored pencil, or maybe both. I like to use both because sometimes it's all about choosing the right tool for the job. So let me tell you what I mean by that. So for example, I think I got it all. Looking a lot better now, a little bit more cleaned up. Okay. For example, if I was going to color in this teeny tiny area, do you think that it would be better? Let me grab the color I need here. Do you think that it would be better to use a colored pencil, which has a very, very small tip, or let's say a crayon, which has a much wider one? If you're trying to get into a small area, what do you think would work best? If you said a colored pencil, you'd be right. Because it has a smaller tip, it's easier for you to get into those little nooks and crannies, those small areas, versus a crayon. Now, let's say all you have are crayons. A good solution to that is to use newer crayons, or what I like to do, since I have tons of old crayons laying around, is I actually sharpen my crayons so that I can get into smaller areas when I need to. So, crayons and colored pencils, great for a variety of different jobs. Now, the reverse of that is also true. So for example, if I was going to be drawing a big wide open area, a crayon might be a better choice than a colored pencil because it might be quicker and get the job done in an easier way. Okay, so crayons or colored pencils for this artwork. And now I'm going to just kind of work through a couple of different techniques for using color to make your artwork look more real, and really, kind of bring it to life. So here's an artwork. You might remember me telling you about this one. This is the landscape that's the view out of the art room window. And what I did before I started here was to just go ahead and color it. Now this, I've just kind of straight up colored it, mostly with crayons. I did use colored pencils here on the barn. But one of the things I wanted to point out to you is when you go to add color, think about using a variety. So for example, I knew that there was going to be a lot of green in this picture. So instead of choosing one green and coloring in the trees and the fields here all one green, I chose different values of green or different lightness or darkness. Let me show you what I mean. So this green, I'm going to flip over my paper and you'll notice that I do a lot of testing on the back of my paper. That's always a good idea. So in the beginning, when I was trying to figure out my colors, I decided, okay, for these trees in the back, because they're farther away and I want to make them look almost like pine trees, I'm going to use this darker green. But let's see, if I test this one out, I chose to use this green for this hillside here. I kind of like how you can see the lines through because then you can really test out the colors on the actual thing itself on the back. All right, and then I had another green that was much more yellowy, so I decided to put that in the front. So let's flip it back over so I can show you again. So you'll see here that I use the darker green and then this kind of medium green and then a little bit lighter and then finally the yellowy green to end. It just gives it a little bit more variety and brings interest to your artwork. Now I want to show you how to take just this straight up coloring where I went from side to side to make a nice smooth covering and make it look a little bit more real. So these trees back here are like pine trees. So I'm going to use my crayon now and work back into the coloring that I did. Check this out. I'm going to start over here and decide that, okay, this is one of my pine trees. So I'm just kind of coloring in the shape of the tree. And then I'm going to stop. Now, right next to that one, I notice I can make another pine tree that comes down. Now there's another one right here because I'm working with sort of the little triangular tops that I made. And just pressing down super hard on my crayon so that I'm getting a little bit even more variety in color. So I'm sort of developing those different trees that you see into separate individual trees instead of just one whole mass. Now watch this. I can bring back a brown and maybe even work in some tree trunks here. So you're starting to see it even more. Okay, so it's just giving it a little bit more detail, making it look a little bit more realistic. I could even take another green, like this was that yellowy one, and I could make some more little trees in between if I want. Or if you find a darker value of green even, you can work that in as well. So there is how you can give it a little bit more of a realistic look, but you also are getting a little bit more texture here, or the way that it feels. So like bumpy, smooth, soft, prickly, all of those are texture words. This is making it look a little bit more like pine trees here. Now you can do the same thing, but this time on grass. So for example, in the foreground, I know that that's where I'm going to see the most texture because it's closest to me. So what I can do, I've got this coat of light green here that I already put in. I can then come back with, let's see, I think I'll use this one. And I know that grass has a texture that's sort of like up and down, right? So I have like little lines here that I can put in sporadically. And you can see that instead of it just looking like, almost like little spots of white in here, I can start to work in the texture of grass. So I'm being real loose with it. I'm not making it super perfect. I'm just kind of randomly making little lines that go up and down to create this texture. I can also work in, maybe a couple of darker values in here. Again, just gives it a little bit more variety and makes it look more real. Let's see, I think I want to work this one in now. So now I'm really starting to get my texture built up of my grass. All right, now continue working on that until it looks the way that you want it. You could also bring texture into the other areas if you want. In fact, even on this like dirt road, if I wanted to make it look like a little bit more gravelly, I could kind of just make these almost like curling shapes and lines. So I'm just kind of going around and around. I could also take, let's see, if I use this black lightly and just kind of make little curling or, you know, lines in little circles, I can make it look more textured, okay, and kind of rough looking. All right, now what I want to do, oh, I forgot to mention the sky. So let's come back to that. So something that I did in the sky, just to make it a little bit more interesting, obviously I colored in the sun, but take a look at what happens here. Instead of just using one blue, I actually blended in another darker blue toward the top here, and then kind of overlapped the colors just to make it look a little bit more interesting. All right, which brings me to the barn. Now, I like the way the barn looks like this, but I have a way to make it look even more realistic. So just so you are aware, I did use colored pencils for this. And remember that, you know, the harder you press down, the darker your color is going to be. So I've gone pretty lightly so far. I'm going to go in all the same direction. And I'm just building up that color, okay? It's a nice bright red barn out there, and I want to make it look like that, not pink like it sort of was looking before. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill in those areas. Now, take a look at where the sun is. The sun is on this side of the barn, which means that this side of the barn is going to have a shadow. So whenever there's an area in shadow, the color automatically gets darker. You could choose to find a darker red, but since I don't have a darker red right handy, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to blend in another color. So first, I'm just going to continue to go over this to make it that darker value just like the other side. Okay, so you see that it's pretty similar here, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a black. Now be careful because black a little goes a long way. So you don't want it to entirely turn into black. You just want it to darken up the red. So very lightly, I'm just going to go over the side of my barn here to make it look like it's in the shadow. And what's cool is, I'm going to go in the other direction now and kind of do almost like crisscrossing my lines of my coloring here. What's really cool is that when you do that, it makes the barn look even more realistic. So using these types of shadows in your artwork can really make it pop, really make it look real. So here is my artwork. Now this is still a work in progress, of course, because this is the one where I was testing out my techniques and showing you guys and demonstrating for example. So I'm going to keep working on this and definitely develop these trees more in the background so they look more realistic. Remember that the back of your paper is a great place to test all your colors and have fun with, you know, using the color to really bring your artwork to life. Adding in textures, using the variety of different values, so darker greens to lighter greens, playing around with the texture, just kind of experiment with it and see what techniques really work well for you. So, can't wait to see your finished landscapes. Keep up the great work. When you're finished, take photos and send me your artwork or upload to Seesaw so that I can see what you've been up to. Hope you're all doing well. Have a great day, and I will see you soon.